Yep.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Virtual Investor. This is Michael and I, and we're going to be talking about quite a few different things today, but two important subjects, I think, in particular for new investors: dangers of investing in condominiums, HOA associations, townhouses, and things like that. A lot of new investors, Mike and I have dealt with this with students over the years, think they got a great deal. And the next thing you know, and Mike, we were just talking about this before, so why don't we get into that story about you weren't able to rent it, right? I can't remember what student that was, but dive into that story real quick so we can show the dangers.
And I mean, it's happened more than one time. That was just one example. Like, for example, we had one of our students, they thought they had a slam dunk another rental property, and it was in a condominium complex. Numbers looked great. And I said, before you pull the trigger and write the check, did you read the kind of like the bylaws? Are you allowed to rent it out? And he's like, oh, no, I didn't do that. And goes back to look at it. Little behold, there was a clause in there that when you buy this condominium, it's owner occupied for the first year. You cannot rent it out at all as an investment property. So unless they wanted to sit on it for a year, which they didn't, that was a deal that they had to walk away from. And we essentially saved them like, $40,000, I think, because that was the purchase price of the condo that they were going to buy. So it's something to be, especially in newer people going into rentals with different homeowners associations and condominiums. You got to read the bylaws and make sure you can rent it out. And sometimes are you allowed to do short-term rentals like a vacation home,
right?
Or is it only long-term rentals as well? Paul, actually, you had that issue, I think, beginning of COVID with one of your properties, and the way some people got around it. I think you rented it out for like 45 days. So I don't know if you want to go into that as an example.
We'll talk about that. So that was up in the Pocono Mountains. I still have that one, have it as an Airbnb, but when they locked everything down, they were restricting short-term rentals. And what a short-term rental was listed at in Pennsylvania was 0 to 30 days. So I just had to rent it out 31 days or more, which I was doing. I was renting it out for 45 days generally, and a couple of them for 2 months. So there's workarounds, ways to get around that. The other thing is just to rent it year round, obviously, but this was the workaround in that case. And there's always a danger of that happening again anywhere in the country too, right? And certain places would be more restrictive with it than others, and certain HOAs will be more restrictive too. And another one I was thinking about, because where I'm in Florida, a lot of 55 and over communities, right? So then you're restricted there too. A lot of them don't allow rentals, or if they do allow rentals, a lot of them aren't the first year. And then you're going at like 3 or 6 month increments, usually with those 55 and over communities, especially the older ones I remember on the East Coast of Florida. So those are some of the dangers you get with these communities as well. And then you have, capital contribution fees when you buy. Like the one we're buying in now, they were just having an election about doing capital contribution fees, so there are no special assessments coming up in the near term. But that capital contribution fee is $2,200. So that's $2,200 more you got to come up with when you're buying that property, which is something to think about when you're looking at as a rental. Plus, you never know when a special assessment comes up, right?
Yeah, that's a good point right there. You're buying into a community, so you're getting amenities, and it's going to be a cost to that, whether it's snow removal up in the Northeast or a pool and tennis courts, right?
Yes.
And you probably want to look into what the track history is of that fee, because you got to factor that into your cash flow analysis, whether it's a short-term or long-term rental. So is it annual dues at $2,200 as an example in your case, or more? Does the property still make sense as an investment property?
Yeah.
And maybe just talking to others in those communities to understand how good the board is. Are there any special capital build projects coming up where they might reassess and hike up fees? I mean, that's got to kind of go into your analysis as well.
Yeah, the extra level of due diligence you need to take with these, definitely, talk about reading the bylaws, talking to the HOA themselves, like you said, finding out is there another project come up, or adding a pool that they need to raise money for. So there are going to be more special assessments coming. Sometimes these older HOAs, they start having problems. After 20 years, they need to redo the roads or redo this, that, roofs. If they're not single family, roofs are generally your responsibility. But if you're into like the multifamily stuff or townhouses or condos, they're generally going to be the HOA. So you got to look at those types of things, because those are super important as far as killing your cash flow, depending on what you're going to get. And some of these HOAs are expensive, but the older ones, they have a track record. So there's an advantage there, right? So if you know this has been around 30, 40 years and they haven't had any special assessments, you could generally assume they're doing a pretty good job with how they're running the thing. But they also might have a high monthly HOA. Like I was looking at a condo yesterday down here, $709 a month on a HOA. That's pretty pricey, pricey. So it's one I just like check off, not one I'm going to be looking at as an investment opportunity when it comes up.
So I want to dig into something you just said. Depending on what you're looking at, you could get a condo, which is really just apartment buildings, right? You know, 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. You have single family homes, which are more homeowners associations. And then you also have a mix of stuff. It could be townhomes, single, detached, et cetera. Do you have a preference personally on which you go after, or you don't care?
I'm always looking at the cash flow numbers, but I do think the single detached is better, and it's always going to be easier to rent. People prefer that over being on top of each other. I think that's a general preference, but you know, it really depends. An older couple, they may just want a little, 2-bedroom, smaller, lower unit. They don't want to have to go up and down stairs, things like that. So it depends who your tenant is going to be, what you're looking at, who you're looking at renting to. I might end up getting a mixture of that kind of, whether it's a condo, it's a 2-story condo, a 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom. I've had and owned both, and I've rented in the past short term in Florida years and years ago, but I got away because the HOAs were just too pricey and they were too restrictive with how long you could rent it for. And it just ends up not being worthwhile, even in these lower cost communities. So I do think the single is better. And then talking about single family rentals, they're probably the ultimate best, least risky, but probably most expensive, right? They're probably the most expensive property to purchase out there.
Yeah. A lot of people love the BRRRR method, right? Buy, renovate, resell, refi, et cetera. Is a condo, a single family, a townhome, any one of them harder or easier to do using the BRRRR method with financing? So if you put your money into it, can you get it out basically?
Yeah, it can be, because I run into, this was back in Pennsylvania, not York County, going out west, trying to remember, Morgantown. Morgantown's right off the PA Turnpike going west, King of Prussia. We bought, years and years ago, bought a bank-owned property there. They would not, you couldn't get an FHA mortgage or a VA mortgage in this community. For whatever reason, there was some restriction on it. You couldn't do it. So you can only do conventional or cash. So that really restricted your buyer base, especially this was right after the financial crisis. So it's hard for anybody to get a mortgage. Luckily, we sold to somebody who was a buy and hold. They bought it with cash. They weren't worried about pulling money out of it yet. They were just going to use it as a rental. But that really did constrict. Like if that was open FHA, we could have made 20 or 30 more grand on that resale than what we did. So there's something you got to look for with that, right? Some of the dangers, some of the shortfalls of these HOAs and these condos, townhouses, there's a lot of things to think about. That's all, but it does affect the financing sometimes when you're trying to do the BRRRR method. They may only give you 65 or 70% LTV compared to 75 or 80% on a single detached. Yep. So that's some of the dangers you get. The single detached, you and I were talking about this before, you get you're going to get the most income from that as far as per unit cost, least amount of turnover, because a lot of times you're going to get families in there. You don't have to worry about somebody on top of you that you can't stand your neighbor in a duplex or triplex or quad. So you don't have those issues. And then when you go to resell, you have the biggest buying group of people, right? Most people are looking for single family detached. So you're going to have the most potential buyers. And ultimately, that's kind of what you want as an investor. You want the best. It's going to generate the most income, hopefully the most cash flow. Single families won't create the most cash flow. Multis definitely will. But as far as overall appreciation, you're going to get more appreciation from the single family detached, and you're going to get, it's going to be easier for you to sell at any point, whether it's market's an upturn or a downturn. I don't know if you have anything to add to that there, Mike.
I mean, you laid out all the different options, and then you as the individual investor, meaning you watching, it's, what's your investment strategy, right?
Yes.
Do you want that appreciation upside? Then it's going to be running out single family homes where you don't make as much cash flow, as an example, right? So you got to figure out, you got to listen to what Paul just said, lay out all the pros and cons of each, and then figure out from your investment philosophy, strategy, whatever it is you want to call it, what's best for you and your plan.
Totally. And some of the advantages, let's go over advantages of the condos, the townhouses, because there definitely are. Let's say it's in a community like I'm in where there's a pool, tennis courts, and things like that you can go to, playground, basketball courts, outside beach volleyball. That draws more people in. You could charge more rent for that. So that is a nice feature to be able to draw people in. The Airbnb I have up in the Poconos, you got the lake. It's on a nice lake. It's also got amenities, a pool, the inside pool, outside pool. I definitely know outside pools here. I'm not sure about an inside pool in that particular community, but it's got a lot of draws to it, a lot of hiking, things like that. So there are benefits to it, to communities like that, and that you're generally going to have a lot more demand because there's things to do. A single family house is going to be hard to do an Airbnb, right? There's no draw to it unless there's something close to it. If you got bike trails, hiking trails, things like that close, ski mountains, that's kind of what you need for those. So those there are benefits obviously of the HOA communities and these condos where you could just cruise outside, go right down to the community center and jump in a pool and, have those features. So like you said, it depends on what you want, and maybe a blended of all these single family and condos, townhouses is what you end up wanting. But it's all about your taste, right?
Yep, exactly.
And risk tolerance.
Yep. Are there any markets that are ideal for cash flow, whether it's single family or condos or just cash flow in general that you and I are looking into now?
Definitely, I think the Pocono Mountains are still great for cash flow as far as, and also a draw work as Airbnbs. The Jersey Shore, yeah, that doesn't work probably. It's too expensive to buy down there. Florida, different parts of Florida, the Carolinas too, closer to the coast. If you get close to the coast, or if you're near golf community or golf courses, near Myrtle Beach, things like that, I think those would be great spots to be. Obviously, Arizona would be good. You're going to pay, the problem is you're going to pay a premium on those, but you're also going to rent these at a premium too. People want to go there during spring break. People want to go there during the winter when it's cold in the Northeast. So they'll always have their demand. They'll have a little bit reduced demand during the summer, but you're still going to have demand in general. People are still vacationing. They still want that tropical environment or the warmer environment. So those would probably be pretty good locations. And surprisingly, like there's ones in the Poconos, that when I first bought this Airbnb, I didn't know whether it's going to be good all year round. I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is a winter and a summer thing where people aren't, but no, it's got as much demand in the fall and the spring as it does in the winter and the summer. Summer's the peak because everybody's off, kids are off, but we still got it's almost always booked year round. So it's always good market, and you can pick up things for 100,000, 150,000. And if you're getting $125 to $150 a night, you're going to do pretty well with them long term. So I think, that kind of wraps up those, but, actually let's get to the BRRRR again on the single family. So the BRRRR on the single family, generally easier: buy, renovate, rent, refinance, for those that don't know what BRRRR stands for. And you're going to get the most, 75%, maybe 80% LTV. If it's a refi, 80% LTV. If it's a cash out refinance, they generally limit you to 75% on with a lot of these, whether it's Lending Home, Lima One Capital, Lending One, or Riva Financial. There's a few of them out there. You're going to be able to draw a little bit more money out of those than you will potentially at one of these HOA communities. So